So if I were to make a motion of my left arm, the device would pick that up on the top graph, as you can see. That's me moving to the left and the right. One thing to note is the calibration needs to be tuned, so if you notice the top sensor is moving a little additionally, but these are all fine tunings that we need to make. But if you notice that the device just take into account the angle of motion, so that's about 22 degrees. So it has that capability to take into account the angle of motion. On top of that, if you look at the columns on the right, the third column, distance, so basically all these columns provide you data for each major motion that you make. So if I were to make a motion to the right and then start moving back, it would give me the motion that I just made. So in that case, I had moved 16 centimeters with a velocity, average velocity of 7 centimeters per second and an acceleration of 3 centimeters per second squared. And I'm at an angle of 54 degrees. So it provides you all this information. That's one of the keys. So if I were to make another motion and start coming back, it would tell me that the distance of that motion was about 27.8 centimeters. That's very important for the clinicians because they can keep track of larger motions, the bigger picture of what the patient's doing, and they can sort of get information about the frequency that the patient has moved a certain distance. So maybe the patient moved between 25 and 30 centimeters about 20 times, and between 10 to 15 centimeters about 5 times. So that gives them that information. If you notice the graph on the right, that provides information about the x direction on the left and the right direction, and the y direction on the right, and each of the colors on the graph are two different sensors. So if I were to move, let's say, my left arm in the y direction just without an x movement, so if I were to move up and down, you would start to see this in the graph. As soon as I get rid of this toolbar. So you would see this constant up and down motion on that top right graph. And you see very little motion in the x graph. Similarly, if I were to move in the x direction, you would see this. Both sensors are following each other in the x graph for the left arm. If I start turning my arm in an angle, you would see this in the x direction as a crisscross of these sensors because they're moving in the opposite direction. So it's a lot of information on the right graphs, but for a initial view before a final GUI is designed, it's a interesting view of what your sensors are doing. But this is basically what our code does. It reconstructs the motion in 2D.